Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the challenges in rare ovarian cancer research, particularly in laboratory research. And I thought I'd start with this incredibly unrepresentative picture of the climate in Scotland. So I'm really happy that David mentioned a lot of the non-epithelial rare ovarian cancers, because really, a lot of the time when we talk about rare ovarian cancers, we still kind of focus in on the epithelial types of the carcinomas. And here you can see some of the ovarian carcinoma types. And of course, a lot of the research to date has focused on high-grade serous carcinoma. And really all I want you to take away from this figure that's just popped up is that each kind of like row here is kind of a different layer of molecular characterization. So really the message is that in ovarian cancer, research progress has been made and we understand a lot about this common type, high-grade serous ovarian carcinoma, to the point where actually we're able to put on lots of layers of information to look at how different molecular changes interact with each other. And kind of and that kind of really allows us to move from a more simplistic view of the molecular landscape in these tumors, which I've just put above here, where in this pie chart, kind of almost every patient is assigned one like molecular group or molecular defect. And with kind of like the advanced knowledge that we have now, we're actually able to kind of come to this more complex view at the bottom, where we actually see overlaps and interactions between molecular changes. In contrast, in the rarer ovarian cancer types, we don't have this kind of advanced understanding. This is an example of some work from Edinburgh in endometrioid ovarian cancer, where we have really just characterized the kind of fundamental underlying gene sequence changes that are present in endometrioid ovarian cancer, and starting to understand what those mean in terms of patients and their kind of risk profile. In the context of low-grade serous ovarian cancer in Edinburgh, we're doing some work to look at using laboratory models of low-grade serous ovarian cancer cells that grow in the lab, and testing about 2,000 drugs that are actually used in either other cancers or other disease settings to see if any of those are actually good candidates for then using in low-grade serous cancer. And this is quite an attractive strategy because the fact that these agents are used in other settings means we know things like toxicity profiles and doses, and that kind of means that we can accelerate their progress for the most promising candidates towards clinical studies and getting some of these promising drugs into patients. The last piece of work I'm going to talk about from Edinburgh is in carcin sarcoma, which is a very rare tumor type where really we're only kind of at the stage where so little has been done that the work that we've really done to date has really been showing that these actually are a distinct group and are kind of worthy of their own distinct attention. So far and away from where we are with high-grade serous carcinoma. So challenges in research in these rare tumors, we've talked quite a lot about limited funding. Obviously that kind of puts the brakes on a lot of progress that could be made if resources were limitless. But also really importantly, there's a limited pool of expertise in rare tumor types. And one of the kind of big challenges is in expanding that expertise and kind of distributing that expertise in the most fruitful way to accelerate research forward. There are also challenges around the perceptions on the importance and impact of work, mainly around kind of the frequency at which some of these tumors arise, and especially from like a funding point of view, there's definitely kind of an issue with perception on the amount of impact that you can have when your research is applicable to a smaller population of patients than one of the larger kind of patient groups. And kind of compounding all this is really a lack of fundamental knowledge, so kind of a basic biological understanding of some of these tumor types. So here's that basic view of high-grade serous that I talked about, that I said, you know, research is now allowing us to move away from this. And by comparison, I've just put up a basic view of low-grade serous cancer. So there has been work in this field, as Dr. Gershenson described before, but actually you can see the whole kind of left-hand side of this pie chart is still kind of an unknown and a question mark, and there are huge blanks that we still need to be filling in for these tumors. A comparative view for Carcin's sarcoma is essentially just one big question mark. So you can really see here that there are very large gaps in knowledge, and it's very difficult to then kind of advance towards whether it's new agents or more advanced molecular understanding of these tumors when we don't have that fundamental knowledge in place. Kind of focusing on funding challenges, obviously the importance of funding. Funding is what kind of powers the research. It's what buys the lab equipment, the reagents that we use to study these tumors, and it's really that it's that kind of scientific investigation that then eventually leads to potential new treatment options. I want to highlight that kind of ring-fence funding for specific topics really drives progress in those topics. So kind of ring-fence funding for specific rare ovarian cancer types is an opportunity to really drive progress there. And to highlight that the funding doesn't just fund kind of like lab science, you're also thinking about funding the training for kind of the next generation of scientists, researchers, clinicians, and also funding to retain that kind of uncommon expertise. So once we've kind of trained that expertise up, we need to keep it within the community. Otherwise, we're not taking advantage of that kind of investment. Continuity in academia can be quite challenging for researchers, especially at an early career level, because people are often employed on maybe short-term contracts or maybe encouraged to move to lots of different institutions, which can be hugely beneficial and bring collaboration, but it also creates kind of a continuity problem with expertise. I kind of mentioned the importance of funding for training the next generation, and really the counterbalance for investing that funding is that actually if you can get people interested very, very early on in rare ovarian cancers, then you're kind of training expertise for a whole future career. So that can be really fruitful. In terms of investing in early career researchers, again, you're building expertise that's going to last potentially a lifetime. And also early career researchers bring in things like new ideas and lots of energy. And really, it's kind of investing in those that is the future proofing of rare ovarian cancer research, because ultimately we kind of have the obligation is on us to make sure that there's a future for these studies. Some challenges is that ovarian cancer overall attracts less funding compared to diseases like breast or lung cancer. And so rare disease subtypes of ovarian cancer are kind of particularly impacted and are perceived as less impactful. Funding for ovarian cancer is often through ovarian cancer specific funding sources. And as I mentioned, the kind of lack of fundamental knowledge can be an obstacle, particularly if you're putting funding applications in and maybe the funding organization perceives the application to do fundamental work on gaining, say, an understanding of gene sequence. Now, those are being compared against applications that are doing perhaps more sophisticated work that are only possible because that fundamental knowledge is already in place for that other disease type. And of course, there are questions around difficulties in translating findings into relatively small patient populations. So in terms of rare diseases being perceived as less impactful, this really highlights the huge importance of patient advocates. For ovarian cancer specific funding sources, this is one way that can kind of contribute to an environment of competition in research instead of cooperation. So that's really something to bear in mind. I talked a little bit about lack of fundamental knowledge, and really in terms of translating findings into small patient populations, like kind of Jane really touched on really nicely, is that you have to think globally in terms of international collaboration to make things like disease-specific trials possible in this setting. So early career researchers, so this is kind of period of researchers after PhD, all the way up to kind of like junior group leaders leading their own research. It's a period of real kind of enthusiasm and creativity. And actually, they have maybe a kind of logistical advantage that often we aren't overrun with other kind of academic commitments. One of the disadvantages of ECRs is that we have a very limited time to kind of demonstrate our potential to lead our own science. This means that we require a lot of support, and this can be quite difficult in rare ovarian cancers where expertise is overall quite limited and tends to kind of like gravitate towards each other in centers of excellence. And this can make it difficult for early career researchers in places that maybe aren't centers of excellence because they don't really have that support in place. And, you know, we've talked quite a lot about the importance of collaboration and kind of globalization when we're thinking about rare ovarian cancers. So it's very difficult to kind of make it sailing alone when you don't have those kind of hubs of expertise right next to you. And again, consistency of expertise can be a problem because of short contracts. Something to really bear in mind is that actually the rare ovarian cancer field is competing with other tumor types, including high-grade serous carcinoma, for kind of the best early career researchers. So we really need to find ways of attracting and retaining them. So key opportunities to kind of seize. I think one of the biggest ones is really getting people interested early in their careers, because rare ovarian tumors are certainly a very interesting and kind of exciting area to be working in. There's lots of work to be done. They're an incredibly interesting collection of tumors. And if we can get people invested kind of early in their careers, then that should help to kind of train and retain that expertise. Securing ring fence funding for specific rare ovarian cancer types, I think, is a big priority. And we need to really be thinking about attracting a range of expertise. So not just molecular biologists, also thinking about people in up-and-coming fields like artificial intelligence, digital pathology, and really kind of thinking very, very broad in terms of who can we bring in that are going to have new ideas and new concepts about how to make progress here. International networks of researchers are super, super important. This is also an opportunity to get people interested and supported in rare ovarian cancer research without them actually needing to be in those hubs. If they know that they're part of a network, that's a way that they can be supported really across the world. We talked a little bit about international consortia on specific rare ovarian cancer types. These are a huge opportunity to kind of focus and prioritize work, to organize, to make sure that we're not duplicating work, so that we're making the most out of the resource that we do already have. These are amazing opportunities to facilitate collaboration between groups, including making large collections of these rarer tumor types. And they're really, really key for facilitating these disease-specific trials. And I'm going to leave you there.